That right there is a 55 grain 223 bullet. This right here is 123 grain 7.62 by 39. This right here is 130 grain 6.5 Creedmoor. This here is 185 grain 308, and this right here is a 300 PRC with a 225 grain bullet.
Yep, heart shot. Well, right heart.
Okay, center mass.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Gun Talk Minnesota. Today I have my Ruger Precision Rifle chambered in 300 PRC. Real big fan of the cartridge, real big fan of the rifle. So I took a $2,000 risk. I'm going to tell you kind of briefly and subjectively and not include every detail that everybody wants. I'm not going to have a super long-winded review. I just want to talk about the things I care about with this one because this isn't sponsored content and I don't have any requirement to cover everything. I'm just going to talk about the stuff I want to talk about with this. So I took a $2,000 risk on this rifle. I wasn't sure about the Ruger Precision Rifle, other than I know it's performed decently in some other calibers. When it came to the Magnum, particularly the 300 PRC, I wasn't sure if I wanted to step into that world or not. I've been pretty happy with my results from shooting 6.5 Creedmoor and 308, you know, out to that just past 1,000 yards line, and I've done pretty well with it with some other rifles. But this is the first Ruger that I had purchased, and I'm not real impressed with some of the Ruger lower end models. For long range anyways, and maybe those aren't really dedicated towards long range. They're just hunting rifles or ranch style rifles, something like that. This though is a purpose-built rifle, and I really needed it to perform well. For $2,000, I can't take too much of a risk, and I feel like I did take more of a risk than I normally ever would. I'm not somebody who has a really high income, and so I had to save up a long time for this. I had to sell a lot of things to make this happen, but it was my dream to have a decent 1 mile gun. I don't need a 2 mile gun, but I wanted a 1 mile gun. And in fact, I've seen this chambering and this rifle configuration shoot 1 mile and 2 mile successfully, and so I know it's capable. I'll start off with just a couple of the features really briefly, not going to go into too much detail, but starting from this end, and I'll give you my opinions as I go. The folding stock mechanism here is pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. It's strong enough. I'm not concerned with the lockup or any wiggle. I feel like it's fairly strong. The wiggle is very, very minimal. The detent is decent, and it does snap into place. The only thing I've had happen with that folding mechanism is sometimes if this is twisted, if your bolt is twisted a little bit, the end cap comes off, you get a couple pieces and components coming out into the buffer tube and it doesn't fold, and you could break something if you weren't paying attention. So maybe one redesign there would actually be something to do with the end bolt, and I know that like Anarchy Outdoors sells a different shroud that you could get if that's something you care about. I just stick it out with this. I'm fine with it. I'm really happy with the performance of the rifle and shooting. These other things maybe I'll get to down the road. The stock itself, there are some complaints online from people about the stock, and I didn't have as many complaints with the stock. I did put a bag rider on it. It's just a 3D printed one. I don't need an extra weighted one, although that might be nice for some people to help reduce recoil even more. We'll talk about that in a second. This does have a cheek riser, which I don't need because I'm not shooting on high rings. Remember that this is all an inline system, and so recoil is going to be pretty nice and straight right back to the shoulder. The critique that I have is that with a $2,000 gun and with this stock and the thought that they put into some of these components, it would have been really nice if they had put a shoulder riser on this or a lifter so that this portion right here could actually elevate to get up a little higher. It's really nice for people like myself and just different body types, especially if you're going to use a raised cheek piece and you're going to lift up that optic. And you want something with some adjustment there. It's not too bad, and I could purchase an aftermarket one if I wanted to, but that's like $190 or so to get just a riser in there. I think it should have come with that for $2,000, guys. Come on, Ruger. But it's a decent one, and I'm probably not going to replace this anytime soon, but it's just on a buffer. If I wanted to, it'd be easy to slip that off and put on something else. So I guess modularity for the win. I actually opted for an MDT grip on here. It's just one of my favorite grips. This is the more simple version. It's affordable, and I like it just fine. It works with that ambidextrous safety, does not interfere. It gets close, but it doesn't interfere. So I took off that stock grip, which wasn't bad, but I just prefer a vertical grip. This is what I've gone with. It's helped me get a nice position on the trigger for a nice straight back trigger pull each time, and I think aesthetically it looks better. The safety is fine. There's nothing special about it. Again, it's a $2,000 gun. I would have liked to see something with a little more flair, just more ridges, more pyramids to grab onto. That would have been cool, but not that big of a deal. And my thumb actually sits pretty nicely against that. You know, a lot of people actually use the ambidextrous side for their thumb for positioning, and I think I kind of shoot it more like that right there. Okay, moving on. Let me just go internally. The bolt is a big, heavy-duty bolt. I think it's cool. It works well. I know that, oh, there we go. I just had the issue I've been talking about, a plastic piece on the end. For whatever reason, this thing twists off, and I'm not sure why it's twisting off or if it's happening under recoil or something. That's just one small complaint about an internal there. Stays together if I keep it together, but this bolt and this bolt face, I haven't had any issues with that. I haven't had too much issue with loading or extraction with this. I will say the 212 grain from Hornady, for some reason, I would say the first 100 or so rounds out of the rifle, that round in particular was hanging up a little bit on the brass as I was feeding it in. It could be something to do with the feed ramp there. I'm not sure what was happening, but I just had a little bit of a hang up where I'd have to finagle the bolt just a little bit, and now that has gone. So I don't have that issue anymore. Locks up nice and tight. I like the tri-lug design, and as far as tightness, you know, if accuracy and precision, consistency is anything that I can trust, I would say it speaks well of a tight lockup, and I don't have concerns about that, which a high pressure round, something, you know, like a 300 PRC, I want it to be very consistent and strong, and no concerns, no issues with extraction either. Flicks them out really nice. Now on to a problem. So this trigger, I'm going to talk about the trigger. I paid $2,000 for this. I knew what the trigger was going to be. I've never owned a Ruger Marksman or whatever it's supposed to be called. That's a terrible trigger, and to put a dedicated long-range gun or a PRS gun out without a decent trigger is really, I mean, that's blasphemy, man. That's really bad. And so I was super disappointed in that. The first thing I did is buy a very light trigger spring, and I took that out and put in there, and it now breaks around, you know, it was 2.5, which is fine for a hunting rifle, but that's not what anybody I shoot with in matches is shooting. Okay, that's just ridiculous, especially for a long-range precision gun or an ELR gun. A 2.5 pound trigger is, I just can't get over that, how bad that is. Well, anyways, I put a very light spring in there, and it now breaks around 1 pound 4 ounces, somewhere around there. That's still heavier than I would like, but it is consistent. I do have a wall, a tiny bit of creep, and it breaks, and I've been shooting some crazy tight groups, so I'm gonna leave it alone at that. I'm just gonna tell you, $2,000 rifle, and it doesn't come with a trigger tech or something, you know, superior to what it has. It just blows my mind. I can't believe it. Another complaint I have is this right here. So this magazine is so incredibly tight, and I thought these would break in. I have 2 of them, comes with 2 of them. Good on you for including 2, but it is so incredibly tight. And feeding, okay, look at this. It's a lot more work than it should be. Sometimes it's more work than that, especially when it was cold out. I had a heck of a time with feeding with this. When it's warm, it seems to be slightly better. Now, during a match, if you're shooting a long-range match, you're probably not going to need both mags. Maybe you will, I don't know, but that's frustrating right there. I'm going to move up to the rail. The rail, I believe, is a 30 MOA rail, and that's good to go. Awesome. Pretty much anybody who's shooting this is going to want a minimum of 30 MOA, I'm sure. You don't need it, probably, because this has the bullets that it's shooting is great ballistic coefficient, and they fly really well, they go far. but I want the 30 MOA rail because of the way that I'm going to zero these optics and I'm going to be shooting them further. So it's nice to have it at 30 MOA. And when I'm dialing up, I'm still in the clear of the glass with that zero. By the time I get to about 1,000 yards, I'm in a clear center of the glass, and that's really nice. You know, moving on to like that 1 mile, it's still pretty nice and clear, not too much issue with that. So 30 MOA is a good decision. I believe that's the same on most of the Ruger precision rifles, or all of them. You'll have to look into that for yourself. The handguard on the Magnums, I believe, is an improved handguard, and it is nice. This is a really, really solid handguard over the barrel. I like it a lot. It does seem to deflect a little bit of heat from going right up to the optic, which has some benefits as well. It still has enough breathe. You know, there's a lot of openings here. Some of the lightening cuts in there, as well as M-lock on the sides, top and bottom, which is a good decision, I think. Going with M-lock. You know, obviously, what else are you going to do? You're going to put Picatinny on there? Probably not. I put one piece of Picatinny on the top. That's because sometimes I run an overbore. This is actually the Picatinny piece that it comes with, and it's a good quality piece of gear. I would have no problem running it on the bottom as well. It's just the fact that I have an Arca mount. I don't need to have Picatinny down there. This down here, by the way, this is a 2.5 pound weight that I throw on with this Atlas Super Cal. This is usually the bipod that I shoot off most of the time, unless it's in winter and I need to get really tall above a snowbank. I'll use an overbore bipod for that. This is really nice though. The setup, it allows the rifle, which is already heavy, to be right around, I think right now as you see it with this Athlon ETR 4.5 to 30, loaded up, I think it was 24 pounds, 25 pounds, right around there. Almost no recoil. This brake, which I'll get to in a second, does its job, but it's nice and heavy. That's what I want for a long-range gun in general. Even if it's a PRS gun, heavy is good for me. I'm fine with that. I'm a big guy, and I don't mind a big, heavy gun with a thick barrel. In fact, I could have done a thicker contour on the barrel. I'll comment on that just for a second. It is a good, beefy barrel. It shoots perfectly well and tight. I have no complaints about accuracy at all with match ammo from just off the shelf. I'm going to show you some groups, and they're hard to believe. But that being said, as far as balance is concerned, it wouldn't have bothered me if it was barrel heavy and we had a thicker contour all the way through. More weight is great for me. Briefly, I'll just mention it does have an Arca rail that is a nice design. It's a really nice handguard, and it has a nice design for that Arca rail underneath with teeth, so it'll engage on different types of Arca mounts on your bipods, which is good. I'm glad to see that. I expect it on a $2,000 gun. I'm just glad it's not missing. And I'll move on down to this brake. Now this brake has some adjustability. You can actually take out a few of the top Allens here. There's 4 options if you want to change some of the way that recoil happens, or it's dispensing energy and air. Probably would push your barrel down and give you some downward force. As it is right now with the weights that I have on there, I don't need any more concussion coming out of this end, because this thing is like a tank brake. It's fairly abusive if you're close on the sides, but being behind the gun, I think it's designed well. It doesn't bother me behind the gun. It's not abrasive to the shooter, and it does help keep things pretty flat just as it is. Again, right around 24, 25 pounds. This thing hardly hops at all, whether on the grass or on a cement bench, and I'm really happy with that performance. Best groups I've shot were actually off the bench in this case, not from the prone. And I didn't have much hop at all. I can stay in the glass. That's one thing I wanted to comment on, is this rifle is built fairly well, designed decently well. And for the $2,000, I'm happy that with a 300 PRC bullet, I'm not dealing with a lightweight gun where I can't stay in the glass and I'm having trouble tracking or following trace. And man, does this thing just stay flat. I've considered this to feel somewhat like shooting my 308 or maybe a lighter 6.5 Creedmoor. Recoil is not bad at all. Okay, so that's just some of the basics of the things I care to talk about. Again, I'm mostly shooting it from a prone or a bench position. I'm not really running gun with this. I'm not hunting with it for sure. It's mostly just a target gun for me, or an ELR gun. That's the way that I envision this build. So I'm going to talk about accuracy. I don't really want to shoot this any closer than 600 yards. At 600 yards, it's putting in groups that are like this. It is hard to believe. And so there's no reason. There's just no reason to shoot it. I'm getting like 2.5-inch groups at 600 yards, and that's with 225 grain ELDs from Hornady. That's just match ammo over the shelf. I'm getting like sub 10 SDs and ES at the same time for that round. I am so pleased with Hornady ammo, so shout out to Hornady. Hey guys, I'm going to record with my phone for just a second here. I was shooting at 1,000 yards with a 300 PRC using some Hornady 225 grain. This is usually my target that I put on my paper. It's a perfect size target. Usually I dial off my target a little bit so I don't hit this thing. Today there's almost no wind and I decided not to hold off. I thought I would be just a 1/10 off here or there, but it turned out I was dead center and I shot the center of the bolt out. Not too bad of a group here at 1,000, so let's focus on the target. So I went 1, 2, 3, 4. I did have a flyer out there. It's still under 10 inches. And 5 dead center. So that was cool. Rifle's shooting really, really well with that 225 grain ELD bullet. I'm super happy with it. I've seen some people say with their Ruger Precision Rifle that beyond like 1,400 yards, they would maybe try a different bullet. But at 1,000 yards, gonna be honest with you, that thing is shooting really, really good. I mean, this right here is half MOA or better. I think I'm gonna have to measure this, but this is better than half MOA for that 4-shot group. I can claim that. It could have been a bad slip on the bag, a little bit of wind combination. Who knows, bad trigger pull, that's all possible. But I'm just saying the rifle just hammers groups like this. It puts out groups like this, even when it's a little windy, between 7 to 8 mile an hour winds. Just does great. So I'm very happy with that bullet and rifle combination. And it's hard to argue with the results that I keep having with this gun. I can't hold on the target because I'll shoot the heart out. And the way that Ruger is, I don't know if it's blueprinted around that or what's happening, but that bullet is so perfect in this gun. And shooting it out to, you know, so far 1,030 yards is as far as I've gotten with it. It's an extremely good bullet. Great BC. It flies really well. I don't care what anybody else says. I know that there's probably some 230 grain AMAXs that fly better at further distances, but at least out to 1,030 yards, the groupings are hard to believe. It's so good. So I don't like shooting it super close. I don't want to shoot it 600, 800 yards. I think the closest I really want to shoot it is 9 or 1,000, right around there, because the bullet is doing so well. I'm typically seeing a pattern, and I'm just going to show you with my hands at 1,000 yards. I'm seeing something like this. Okay, and that's with 212 grain or 225 grain. But the 225 grain on better days, when I'm really doing my thing and the wind isn't too much and the sun's not in my eyes, whatever else, you know, whatever excuses, I'm seeing like 4 and 5 inch groups. And that's not just one time, not just getting the stars to align, I mean consistently getting tight groups. I can't believe it. I've never owned a gun that could shoot like this repeatedly. So one thing that I did, because I wanted to test that accuracy and find out, like, can it truly shoot sub MOA, like half MOA repeatedly? So I put 3 targets out at 1,000, and I put a little like 4.5 inch marker in the target, which is great for this reticle. I can put it right on there and dial off the target a little bit and get my groups. And I use a long shot target camera system so I can see in real time what my groups look like downrange. And I was seeing definitely under 10 inches for the 225s. The 212s, I get more flyers with the 212s, but that's an ELDX bullet. The ELDMs that are the 225s seem to perform better at 1,000 for me, which makes a lot of sense. And I'm seeing, you know, under 10 inches for sure, consistently. The 3 targets that I put out on one particular day, I think it was like an 8.5 or it was 8 3/4 inch group, a 6 inch group, and a 4 inch group. That is insane to me. I mean, I'm happy with an 8.5. I'm really happy hitting an 8 inch plate at 1,000 yards pretty consistently. That makes me happy. But then when I saw the consistency, you know, even under 8 inches, repeatedly with those are 5-shot groups, and I did let the barrel cool in between during the winter, of all things, during the winter. That is seriously impressive. So happy with the gun, happy with the results, happy with the ammo. $2,000 risk. It's a big risk. It's a huge investment. I don't shoot it a huge amount compared to my other guns because obviously it's expensive. Ammo's right around $2.25 per bullet, and I'm not a reloader. I think any reloaders out there, you'll have a hard time doing better than the match ammo that's on the shelf. I don't know, unless you're really, really good and you're shooting further, well, that would make sense. But if you're just going to shoot to 1,000 yards, 1,200 yards, somewhere around there, that 225 grain ELDM bullet is doing so well. So Ruger, for the most part, I'm going to say good job. I'm not a huge critic of Ruger or anything like that. I just think the trigger It's a terrible trigger. I don't think 2.5 pounds is appropriate for a long range gun. The magazine is a little too tight, something there, but it does feed well, so the trade-off is okay. And then not having a shoulder riser. Those are really my only complaints. They're maybe a little bit of nitpicking, and I'm happy with my investment. So if you guys have any questions or an experience with your 300 PRC rifles, or maybe the Ruger Precision rifle, go ahead and comment that down below. Thanks guys for checking out my channel, and maybe watch one of these.